There's a scene out of my life I'd like to share with you. A few years past, my wife and I were driving from Vancouver, Washington to Salt Lake City, Utah to visit some friends. This drive takes you through the beautiful Columbia River Gorge, which is the Columbia River flanked on either side by giant mountains covered with trees. The further east you travel, the scenery changes from tranquil green mountains to dry grass and rocky climbs as you pass from the west side to the east side of the Cascade Mountain Range. When I travel through the east end of the Columbia River Gorge, I like to scour the landscape for wildlife. This region of the gorge is home to herds of bighorn sheep, which I enjoy to view. During this focused search for wildlife, I saw little white towers in the distance. As we drew closer to the towers, I realized they weren't towers at all, but they were giant windmills that dotted the landscape as far as you could see in either direction. At first, I was amazed at how many there were. Then I was appalled at the interference with nature. In my head, I thought, where did all these come from? Who paid for them? And why were there so many? These questions prompted me to find some answers. So I did a little research to help me found. Why were there so many windmills? Turns out there are a number of reasons why there were so many windmills. First, there's been a big push by pop culture of our time to move away from traditional forms of energy and to invest in so-called green energy. Over the years, there have been different forms of renewable energy, such as hydroelectric, geothermal, and of course, wind. However, in the last 35 years, there have been subsidies to the tune of 30 billion to just one of these forms of renewable energy, wind. Wait, it gets better. As of 2010, 84% of all energy subsidies went to foreign entities. In fact, Iberdrola Renewables, a Spanish utility company, collected over $2.2 billion in government subsidies over a 15-year period. And that is just one example of many. Over the years, Congress has enacted 82 laws overseen by 9 agencies to support wind power. That is a lot of money. But it's to fund a good idea, right? Well, let's look at it a little closer. Wind energy cost production estimates are between $56 and $109 per megawatt hour. This is more than twice the cost of some traditional forms of energy. Who pays the difference for this production cost? The production tax credit, also known as the PTC, is the subsidy that pays the difference of the cost to produce wind energy versus traditional forms of power generation. Warren Buffett said that there would not be a wind energy market without the PTC. I want to share with you point your attention to this graph. This is a graph, I hope you can see it there. This is a graph of wind energy production over a 17-year period in the United States from 1998 to 2014. I want to draw your attention here to the first year in 1998 when there was funding from the PTC. And the following year, funding ended, and you can see the dramatic drop in wind energy production. And then again, the following year in 2001, you can see that the funding began again, and you can see the spike in wind energy production. We can see that pattern continues through the years up to 2014. What this tells us, the conclusion we can draw is that wind energy is cannot be supported in the market without the subsidies of the government. But some may say this investment is worth it. We're helping save the environment. We're doing good things for our environment. Well, here's where the monster rears its ugly head. The truth is that with all these subsidies in the market is flooded with cheap electricity. No one is conserving energy. We're using more electricity than ever. This is good for the consumer in the short term. However, there are unintended consequences. That is, this cheap subsidized energy is hurting traditional power plants. They do not have funds to invest in new equipment and new efficiencies because of the low artificial market price of electricity. This cheap subsidized energy That is okay, right? Because we're trying to replace traditional power plants with wind energy, right? Wrong. Regardless of how many windmills there are or how many square miles we cover with windmills, you will still need traditional power plants online to provide power in the event of little or no wind. We have two forms of power generation performing the same function as we did with just one power plant in the past. It seems that we have spent a lot of money on an unreliable energy source. We have built windmills, but not closed any power plants. The same people who complain about seeing oil platforms off the Gulf Coast are happy to cover my beautiful vistas with windmills. The difficult part for me to swallow is that with all the money spent on wind energy, the only change to carbon production is the increase in carbon production from the manufacturing process of the windmills.